Hello and welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour, the weekly bridge to the future of the piano tech community. I'm David Andersen.
And I'm Eathan Janney. And we're here to ask great questions, and then we'll shut up and listen to some of the authorities, experts, and most outstanding personalities in our little world of pianos.
So, put on your best set of headphones and let's get started.
Well, welcome everyone to Piano Tech Radio Hours, being brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. Let's make sure everybody mutes themselves. I'm getting somebody's like moving a piece of furniture or something.
I'm sorry.
Let me see if I can figure that out. Here we go. All right, everybody else is muted now. All right, let me start over. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. This is being brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online educational resource that offers you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You could find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. We just had our second official online convention a few weeks back, around March 18th to the 20th. Make sure we'll add some links in the chat where you can go and follow up and purchase direct access to any of those lectures. We'll also send out some emails in the coming weeks with a few tips from each lecture, just to let you know what's been happening inside behind the curtain, so you can better make a decision whether you'd like to gain access. So yeah, and then today it's going to be a return to our roots here. David and I are going to do a host session today, and we'll kind of talk about what's at top of mind for us, but also open it up to you folks. If anybody has a topic that they think is worthy of kind of a group roundtable, feel free to pop it in the chat and let us know any questions you've been having on your mind about, what are other piano technicians doing? What should I do with this or that? Be it, specific technical issues or business issues or, quarantine issues. All those things are fair game. So yeah, welcome. But David, I think you and I were chatting a little bit beforehand.
Yep, we were.
The first thing that comes to the top of my mind that you said was a good topic, which I also agree is just a good general topic, and that is doing things that you're afraid of. I like that topic a lot. I think I like it out of having to like it instead of hating it, right? It's easy to be afraid of things that you're afraid of, and I think it maybe takes a little bit of emotional, mental kung fu to kind of get excited about doing things that might be a little bit scary. And I think when we're talking about that in this context, it comes down to doing those things to make yourself a better professional that also are things that are a little bit scary. Be that, attempting to do work that you haven't done before, or even as something that I find really simple that I know is difficult for a lot of people is not being afraid to take a few minutes, for example, and this doesn't apply to everybody here, but it could apply to some people. Take a few minutes to practice your temperament skills by ear, even if you use an ETD at the front of each tuning. And why is that scary? Well, it's scary because, what if I run out of time? What if that turns out to be a waste, or I regret it or something like that? But
what if I suck worse than I thought I did?
Yeah, what if I'm actually terrible at it and I have to face that? Yeah, even those little things, and going, I'm going to do that. And of course, you don't just do things. You don't have to jump off a cliff because you're afraid of it, right? You do those things which have some productive potential. So yeah, what do you have to say about that, David?
Well, I'll just get personal and embarrassingly vulnerable right now. I have been, since I first came upon them, terrified of doing damper work. I mean, like some irrational fear of working on dampers. And I've gone through the fear to a certain degree. But if it's between me and anybody else working on dampers, it's the other person, because I'm still terrified of it. Still, to this day, it's an irrational fear. I'm so afraid that I'll mess them up, and that I'll blow the job and make the player sad, and start lashing myself for being an idiot, that I just stay away from it. If for instance, my partner, Nick Morello, does virtually all the damper work, because freaks me out. So I would say that I know enough to put in a set of dampers and regulate them, but it takes me a long time. I'm not having a good time because I have this irrational fear. Really try to stay in the moment, really try to just breathe and stay here. And I've done an okay job of it. On a 1 to 10 scale, I'm at about a 6 or 6.5. So, but breaking through that and being able to do at least an acceptable job doing something that I was literally terrified of, that's pretty good. So I'd love examples from people. I'm going to make you work, people, today. Just raise your hand, and Eathan will unmute you and talk about something you're afraid to do or have been afraid to do. Who's got something for me? Come on, kids.
I'll give a short countdown and then I'll say something to lead the pack here.
Okay.
Oh, Donna Bird has raised her hand.
Donna Bird.
So I'll save mine for a minute. So yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself, Donna. We're happy to hear from you. Yeah, you should be able to just click on the microphone. There you go.
There you go.
I was terrified of going from a regular screwdriver to an electric one.
Darling, we can't see your face. Put your camera up a little bit so we can see your face. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. So I bought a Makita drill screwdriver and then left it under the piano bench for maybe 2 months. At which point I thought, this came in a box that had been retaped. So obviously someone must have taken it back. So I'm going to go in and see if all the parts are there and if the battery is working, and find out how this works. And it just looks like you push on and off button. Okay, so I got a wonderful expert in the hardware store, and she took it out and said, yep, it's absolutely all here. Everything's put together. The light comes on. You're ready to go home. So I went home and the light came on, but the power didn't come on. So I waited another day and went back. And the person that met me in hardware said, I can tell you where everything is on the shelf, but there's a guy here in repair who knows how everything works. And so for me, the answer is to find your Mr. or Mrs. Tool guy, gal. It turned out the power light was not the power for the drill. So that was huge relief. And I came home and drilled my 4 drills to put the little brackets in for my bookshelf. And I thought, well, that's, who knows? Is that $100 a hole? I don't remember how much I paid for it. But that's the way I conquered that.
And are you using the electric screwdriver in piano work?
Well, that's my plan. I don't know why you can't do it with action screws.
You can.
And there's this lovely little chart. So I can figure out exactly which screw I need and get the right bit and go in there. I think I'll even take my stare at wire cutters and see if he can sharpen the blades on them for me.
Yeah.
So
Thank
that's
you.
my terror and success of the week.
Terror and success. That's what we're looking for here, kids.
Oh, and I also wanted to say Leroy Edwards was talking with me about dampers one day, and he said, just breathe, like you mentioned, but take the damper out of your piano and using the piano as your guide for bending, you'll get it straight.
Yeah. Terrified. Okay, who else has a story of what terror and success?
Yeah.
Come on.
There's a couple things in the chat here. So
Okay.
let's see here. Joshua Martell shares voicing. Those needles scare him, and the thought of ruining the hammers scares him as well.
So hey Josh, can you unmute yourself so I can ask you a question?
I think you should have capacity to unmute yourself, Josh.
Hey bud.
Hey, how's it going?
So when did you realize you had this tear? Talk about it a little bit.
I'm very new, and I have a sideway console, and getting parts for it, it's so old that even getting replacement parts is hard. So I'm being very careful not to break things or ruin things, hopefully.
So you don't want to ruin the hammers by sticking needles into them? Is that your fear?
Yeah. I know that some of the, if I unscrew something, I can put it back, but and if I break a piece of wood, I can probably glue it back together.
Yes.
But those hammers, if I ruin them, then they probably need to be replaced.
They're ruined. That's exactly right. So I love that you're vulnerable about this. I think it's really helpful to talk to your brothers and sisters. Where do you live?
I live in central Illinois. It's just we've been pretty careful with COVID. And so there is a good community here, and I probably will get some sort of hands-on help soon. But it's been a little bit, in my cave hiding.
Well, that's another thing we're going to talk about. But yeah, as soon as there's at least something toward your herd immunity and you're vaccinated and you can go and hang out with another piano technician that's vaccinated, go, help to turn the terror into a success. Because I was afraid of voicing for the first 15 years of my career. And then I just started to do it and I fell in love. It's an incredibly powerful way to focus your attention and to use your brilliant, magical ears. So
another thing too is to consider, we get people on these calls. There's a chat here. You can reach out. We have instructors that are have taught about voicing. You could also reach out to someone and say, hey, can we set up a Zoom call? And I'd like to try some voicing. Could you just kind of be on the call with me and watch me so that I don't completely ruin things?
Yeah.
And, toss them a little cash or something like that. I'm sure that they either appreciate it or refuse it.
That's right.
So you don't even have to leave your cave.
That's right.
That's an interesting idea. Thank you.
Well, for instance, Josh, I've taught, probably a dozen voicing classes all over the United States and one in Europe and a bunch in Canada. And if you emailed me or even if you called me, I'd be happy to talk to you, man.
Thank you. That's very generous.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. David's generally happy to talk, and he always has interesting and useful things to say. So,
plus, I'm a really good voicer, and I can help you. You know.
But yeah, and also there's these other folks too. There's
there's a ton of other
someone
folks.
like Steve Brady or Boaz Kirchenbaum or David Stanwood gave a lecture on voicing. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting folks. At least those folks, especially that have put themselves out there in PTM, at least they're kind of open to sharing and want to put some time into it. So
yes.
Now I might get complaints from people, but I doubt it. Hey, Eathan, you tell people to reach out to me. But actually, I doubt it.
That would be gauche. Another question you have, Eathan? Did somebody else?
Yeah, let's see. Somebody else said, Nancy Salmon said that she also finds damper work a Pandora's box.
Yes.
This also leads to delight if it all works.
That's right. Terror than success.
And actually, should we see if she has anything else to say about that?
Sure.
Nancy, do you want to share any further? Go ahead and unmute yourself if so. And then
yeah. I think the damper work is frightening because there are so many variables, and sometimes they are so difficult to get at in the field. I do have another question.
Hope your audio froze, right? You getting the same thing, David?
I am.
Okay. Let's wait and see if she comes back. And I want to go on to Alan Eder too. Maybe Alan, you might unmute yourself, because Alan said, where does this widespread irrational fear of dampers come from? So maybe he can quell our fears and cradle us in safety, and we can all move on with some feeling of confidence.
Shri Energy, please.
I'm not offering an answer, just a question.
Oh, it's just a question.
No, we want you to have an answer.
If I knew the answer, I wouldn't be asking the question, or I would.
There you go.
I'm asking you, Sensei, David. Where does it come from?
Where does the fear come from?
The fear.
It probably.
I can talk at length about where fear in general comes from. One of my favorite subjects. But where does the fear of damper work come from?
Oh,
I could say where it could come from for me.
Yeah, I could say where it's come from me too. Go.
Even in practicing for the PTG regulation exam and actually passing it, but in the process, looking at a damper wire that I had worked on for a long time and say, well, that looks pretty damn ugly, and just kind of seeing that that's a possibility, that you can kind of get out of control and then kind of get really lost. I think that's something like a memory of that happening, even if it was earlier on in the experience. I think that can, I think with some sorts of repairs, it feels like you get to repairs and adjustments, there's this point of no return you can get to. Tuning doesn't feel so much like that. Like I'm not going to go so far in one direction that it's way too sharp to bring it flat again. But I think the damper, at least the wire work, has that. And then beyond that, the irrational fear, well, I don't know if it's irrational, the fear of telling a client says, hey, this damper's not working right, it's making a weird sound, and kind of wanting to say, oh yeah, cool, I can take care of that. But then just like fiddling with it and messing with it. And then at the end of the day being like, I don't even know why that damper's doing that still. And then, kind of having to deal with the follow-up, the collateral damage of, I don't know. I did everything I could think of, and this damper still sounds funny. Those are the places where I think it would come to for someone like me. I don't know if you have any more insight, David.
Well, I'll just talk about, I hadn't thought about that, like where specifically it came from, what kind of story I bought into that made me that's career long fear. When I started in Atlanta, Georgia, and I had like a half a dozen other piano technicians that I that passed through the store where I worked, and I knew. And they, one of them said, "Yeah, what's the first three letters in dampers?" Damn. And they were all bitching and moaning, and yeah, they never are right. It's a big pain in the tuchus to do dampers. They're hard. And so I didn't know anything, and I was just, Jesus, I didn't know how to do anything except I could tune really good, but I didn't know how to do anything else. It was really new, like 3 months, 6 months, something like that. And I just, oh my God, I just got that idea, I guess, Alan, that they sucked and they were beyond my skill set. I just took what they said, which was probably just normal whining and bitching, and then they'd go do the job. I just took it as like, oh man, stay away from this. It was my own, amplification of something simple that had caused that fear.
Reminds me of what I might call like the spinach and Brussels sprouts effect. Whenever I was a kid growing up, it was always the example of something that tasted too disgusting to eat, like in a kid's show or on a sitcom or something like that. And then I grew up and I started trying some Brussels sprouts, and I was like, hey, these aren't that bad. I can make these things taste pretty good. Like, what's the big deal about?
Yeah, a little butter, a little vinegar. No,
right, exactly. I don't know. Yeah, so it's like there is a little bit of a kind of, maybe even we're reinforcing it here by talking about the dampers. Right? This air of mystery around it can maybe become pervasive. Somebody was going to say something. Diane, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to. I agree 100% with what David Andersen said. When I joined the PTG in 1978, I went to my first convention, and all the conventions year after year were about how to adjust the damper spoons in upright pianos, and hundreds of people would get in those classes, and different people would show you how to push the hammer rail up and push the, take it out of the action, do this, do that. Everybody had some magic way to avoid adjusting the damper spoons. So I became convinced it was impossible.
Yeah.
But one day, a teacher by the name of Ernie June stood up in front of the class. He was teaching the newest one. And he said, how many of you in here own a tuning hammer? Of course, almost everybody raised their hand. He said, how many of you know how to use it? Everybody raised their hand. He said, did you know how to use it the first time you picked it up?
Right.
So he held up a damper spoon. He says, you can learn how to use this too. And it made such a difference because finally somebody was saying, it's not impossible. You don't have to do these intricate, hard things.
Yep. I got
Good point.
I got the same thing much later in my career. I was teaching like a class at the national conference with Roger Jolly and 2 or 3 other people, and it was like an ongoing an hour a day or 90 minutes a day for the whole run of the like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And Fred Riedekop from Winnipeg was teaching the damper part of it. And we were having a drink one night, and I just decided, I love this guy, and decided to reveal to him that I sucked at dampers. And he both that night and then he said, come and get me for coffee tomorrow morning and we'll go down to that piano we're working on. I'll show you some things. And he made it so simple. He demystified a couple of the things that I was most scared to do. And that's all it is demystification. You know, it's like, see, this isn't magic. This is that. Oh, cool. All right. You know, but my sister wrote a best-selling business book about how the fear of being bad just dampens your whole business or craft or creative life. And this book is called, you should look for it. It's a little book, 130 some pages. It's called Be Bad First.
Oh, yeah.
And it's talking about, you know, whenever you try something for the first time, the vast majority of times you're not very good, barely adequate. But if you do it with attention, don't lash yourself with self-criticism for not doing it perfectly, or quit doing it because you didn't do it great the first time. Your whole life opens up. If you're not afraid to try new stuff and just understand that you're not going to be that good first couple, 3, 4, whatever times you do it, it's really, as my mom used to say, it's good mental health hygiene.
Yeah, you can also turn that fear of being bad into a fear of not being bad soon enough, right? Because it's like, if you're not willing to be bad now at something so that you can get better at it, imagine what waiting to be bad at it, you know, a year or 2 or 3. Imagine how much time you'll lose and how much more you'll have to suffer being bad through in order to get to the same place that other people got to because they were willing, you know, to be bad and learn it and try it and get into it. I would say this too, and this applies directly, and this is why I appreciate you David, so much, and some of the other instructors for Piano Technicians Masterclasses. I really want to give them honor because there is even a fear from the teachers who are, you know, great instructors. They know how to give a great live presentation in a, you know, in a convention room or whatever, but they're, you know, not certain about the technologies of being online and how would that work, and I'm going to sound weird, and what if I don't have this thing prepared, or what if I don't know how to use a computer, all this stuff. And I really have a lot of respect for all the instructors who've just kind of jump in. And you know what? It's not always perfect, but they're way ahead of the pack now in terms of online technology now that they've have a few classes under their belt. And to be honest, the participants of those sessions are appreciative, right? They know that there's going to be a few snafus, but they are so hungry for the information, right, and the connection with somebody has something useful to say that it all works out. So
it just happened. It just happened around this latest class I did for the online conference. What was that, 3 weeks ago or something? A month ago? I was using a film that I'd pre-edited and a deck that I didn't have control over. So I did the run through with Eathan on Thursday night and it sucked. And I just felt like there was no flow at all. And Eathan had the courage to say, dude, this was not so good because you're kind of being enslaved by the technology. You're kind of being enslaved by the movie and the deck and not controlling it. And I can tell you're worried about it. Look, that you know this subject inside and out. Just talk about how to do it and use the the technology is ancillary tools, and just focus on that. People love the way you transmit information, so just go with that. And it was like, oh, okay. He actually allayed my fear. I was still nervous, but I did it and seemed to come off okay. My pal Alan Eater thought it was one of my best classes. Eder, sorry.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Great example, David. Thank you for sharing that.
It's okay.
And Pat actually said in the chat, let me quote Pat here. What did Pat say? I love dampers. Is that I like dampers. I'm good at it. So Pat, would you like to unmute yourself and both make us simultaneously jealous and inspired?
Yes.
Chance.
Okay.
Pat,
Here
what do
I
you
am.
have to say?
Hi,
Awesome.
Pat.
Okay, well, on uprights, I believe that Chef carries 4 different types of bass dampers and 2 different thicknesses of treble dampers. I think they are 1534.5 and 1540.5. 1540.5 are thinner. So on some pianos, if you pick the right size, and test them out, then you don't have to do as much regulation. And on acrosonics, they usually take, I believe, the 535C, which is an offset bass damper.
Oh, and so you can have more damping for your dollar with
right. The pad is offset on 535C and 535D. 535A and 535B are mostly for older uprights. A lot of consoles and spinets take the offset dampers, the C and the D. And sometimes what I do is cut off half of that pad with a razor blade, if that's what it needs to get the right timing.
In other words, you'll customize the dampers however you see fit, as long as they close. As long as they work, you can customize them for timing purposes and what else? Weight purposes, perhaps?
No, timing.
Timing.
Because then you don't have to mess as much with the spoons.
And how did you... I'm sorry.
Go ahead, David. You go. No, you go.
Okay.
Ahead,
and how did you just walk right into this without... Oh, geez, a spoon.
I used to be the shop manager in a piano shop where we sold a lot of used pianos, and I was in charge of fixing them all.
So you had no choice.
So I did a lot of dampers.
Yeah, you jumped in.
And yeah, including things we were fixing for customers too. And we did a lot of old uprights in that time. We were rebuilding old uprights too.
Wow.
And those would be your 535As usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people only stock one kind of dampers and expect it to work for everything. And then you wind up having to do a whole lot of extra regulating.
Wow. That's a tip that's worth this whole hour to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Pat, your experience with dampers came from both replacing full sets and individual dampers that were needed on particular pianos, or what what experiences did you have primarily?
Full sets.
Cool.
That's amazing.
And I'm pretty good at grand dampers too.
I hate you and I love you. I'm
gotta have a wire bending tool to do grand dampers.
Yes, and you have to have a good eye and a good feel. It really takes a lot of concentration for me.
Yeah, the wire bending pliers you have to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus.
Now, not to put you on the spot here, but to put you on the spot, let me ask you sort of on the topic I raised earlier. Let's say somebody here had to deal with some dampers and they had a question. Would you be okay if they reached out and said, maybe asked it or spent a moment on a Zoom call with you or something?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
See?
There you go.
That's why I love piano technicians, especially ones that, especially piano technicians that are in this community and, you know, they just want to help. It's beautiful. I talk to people. I have a lot of friends and I roll in a lot of different circles. And when I tell them how basically awesome and nice and collegial and community oriented that piano technicians are in this kind of domain, they're like, wow, luthiers aren't like that, or basketball nerds aren't like that. We're like such an incredibly good-hearted community. It really is inspiring to me. So thank you, Pat.
Pat, what's your last name? Because it only says Pat there. You're muted, so feel free to put it in the chat, so we know how to find you. Alan Eder, you got something interesting to say?
Yes.
You had your hand raised earlier.
I've got something to say. I hope it's interesting.
It doesn't have to be interesting. Just, be yourself.
I wouldn't draw breath if it wasn't interesting. David Skolnick had his hand up before me. I'd like to hear what he has to say first.
Oh, good. Skolnick.
I think he said it got covered. He had something, but Glenn covered
actually, it was covered, but I was kidding about it being covered.
Okay.
I was giving Glenn Hart a little extra boost there for his comment.
Okay.
No, well, thanks. I sort of followed up Alan's comment about the irrationality of it, and I posed first the question of why it was irrational, which was kind of a leading question, because basically I don't think it's irrational. It's not necessarily irrational if it's taking on a task that A, that you haven't done before, and B, there's a lot at stake. The question would be how you deal with the realities of the task. And the thing that, even as David was describing, and we as independent technicians usually end up having to learn as we go. So as opposed to being put in a situation where you're being taught something, first of all, you're not being expected to figure it all out by yourself, and B, you're expected to work on something and you're expected to ruin something. Without feeling that A, you're getting the information, and B, you have a license to ruin something, then the fear isn't irrational. So the best way to do it would, some people are in a much better situation for that if you're in an institution, a piano institution.
Yeah.
The rest of us will get to the institution later. But
if you're an institution, you can do whatever you want.
If you can be in a situation where you make the decision, okay, I'm going to buy a set of dampers, or I'm going to buy a set of hammers, and I specifically for the purpose of ruining them. Embracing
or the good chance of ruining them, right?
Not for the purpose of ruining them, but for the purpose of finding out how far you can go before
being willing to ruin them.
The first time I asked somebody, how far can you turn in an A-graph before you weaken it or it breaks? Richard Davenport, he said, got an extra A-graph, slather it up with lithium grease, put it in there, feel it, listen to it, notice how many minutes of the clock, and for $2, you can have the answer to that question that you'll never forget. Wow. This can be done on a larger scale also.
You mean a whole set of A-graphs?
So if the fear of dampers is not irrational, I'll go along with you. It's not. How is it different from the fear of learning to tune or to regulate or to voice?
I was going to ask you a follow-up question for what you said, Alan. Did you actually turn it until it breaks, or like what or was it just to feel how it turned out? Like, did you actually break it in that situation and then learn that, or?
Yes. The purpose was to break it, knowing I could get it out because I greased it up, and then it's time to learn how to extract an A graft post. This was ideal. It hadn't been there for 100 years, and it was, it's nice and juiced. And I knew how many minutes of the clock, at least with those A grafts. I knew what it felt like. I knew what it sounded like, and what a great lesson for $2. I pay a lot more than that to go to classes at PTG conventions and PTM conventions.
Right.
So it's good advice. Anyone can do it, but that approach can be scaled up. Obviously, you can be in a situation maybe where you don't buy new hammers, but you think, okay, I'm going to replace these hammers on this piano. So let me find out the limits of what you can do with hardener or with needles or something, because they're going to get trashed anyway. That's invaluable in terms of learning something. And I'd just like to say a few things, if I may, getting back to the fear of damper things. I'm not fearless. There are things I fear in life, and if we aren't that way, we probably won't live very long. But it seems to me most people are afraid of way more stuff, way more than they need to be, and their lives are paralyzed by it. I am not cut out for a fear-driven existence. It doesn't work for me. When it comes to dampers, my first encounter was a client who contacted me and said, we've got a problem. A potted plant fell in our grand piano. I went there. The dampers were all messed up. This was my first few months in the business. Wow. I thought, I have no idea what to do about this. So I went to my mentor at the time and said, can you come work on this? And I'll watch you and learn, because I don't know where to start. And he declined. Okay. So Eathan, when I listened to your story, and David, I listened to your story about dampers, not so different from mine in the beginning. And I've been sitting here thinking about it. The damper work is not what keeps us from doing damper work. It's not what makes us afraid of it. It is the inherited fear of people that we look up to. That's the story you told, David. That's the story I'm telling. Fast forward, I'm working with Richard Davenport. He's telling me that when he was a Yamaha service manager and they sent him to the factory in Hamamatsu, he was told, well, we're not going to put you on the assembly line piano factory. We're going to put you on the handmade piano factory because we hear that you're hot stuff. He goes to the damper guy. The guy takes a wire, mangles it, hands it to him and says, you straighten. Richard took his pliers, sweating bullets inside, cool as a cucumber on the outside, made the wire straight. The guy looks at it from every angle and thinks, okay, you can stay here and watch me work on dampers. Wow. So all the damper work I ever did for Richard fell short, all of it. If I did some today, it would fall short. He's that good. Yeah. But I learned that I can do this. It's a doable thing. And now I have a person who can teach me about this who is not afraid of it. So here's my brief thesis about fear. All fear, I mean all fear, can be traced back to the fear of death. Some people have faced death. They know it's going to happen someday. They don't worry about it. It makes life more precious in the meantime. Other people can't buy enough different kinds of insurance or weapons or other kinds of protection because they are just terrified that someday, one way or another, they're going to die. So that's not directly related to pianos, but it is very directly related to fear.
Brother, I agree with you 100%. Look, I just said this to my son last night. I said, look, you basically live in one of two states of being. You either live in love, like a state of okayness and kind of gratitude and or you live in a state of fear. One of the two. And if you're really honest with yourself, you'll admit either I'm in a good place or a not so good place. Either I'm putting my attention on love or fear. And you're right, Alan. It all comes back to understanding that, the big fear, the fear of death, you can't do anything about it. This is the way life is. I've really learned over the past year that we don't have much control over what happens to us in this life. We think we do, we hope we do, we plan as if we do, but the reality is you don't know. You don't know. So today is the day to feel, wow, maybe I can't do this well, but I'm this and this and this and this. I've got this and this and this. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I should be grateful. Yes, you should. And if you live in gratitude or tend toward gratitude rather than tend toward fear and worry and building up your insurance policies and putting 3 gates between you and a public street, I'd rather live in gratitude than in suffering, than in fear.
Yeah, I think your word irrational, Alan, is appropriate because I think it boils down to: is this gonna be a problem for your health or your life? Are you gonna die, or are you gonna be injured? And if not, then the fear is just kind of like a symptom of our chemical system that is unfortunate. So if you're gonna, don't experiment with electricity, you know what I mean? Don't, but you can experiment with the damper a little bit. It's probably not going to have the same effects as sticking a knife in the electrical socket. Let's see here. What else?
Well,
what else is going on here?
I read the last issue of the Piano Technician's Journal. There was a long interview with Steve Brady. And it was fascinating. In the first 2 paragraphs, the interviewer asked him a question. I can't remember the question, but his answer was, it was about tuning, obviously. And his answer was, I don't think you can call yourself a piano tuner if you can't tune a piano by yourself. And then he said, I use an ETD every day. It's a lovely, beautiful tool, but I use it as a tool and not as a tuner. My ears and my body are tuners. A machine is a beautiful tool to help me to make my life easier. And I wondered how all y'all felt about that. I'm so happy that somebody way better and way more famous than me said that, because I think it's true. I feel exactly the same way. How can you call yourself a piano tuner if your machine breaks and you can't tune the piano?
Well, I'll weigh on that with maybe a little bit of a counter perspective.
Okay.
The one, I mean, I love the side of that motivates people to work on their ear tuning skills. What I don't like is the side of that might bring people shame, for going out there and they don't know their ear tuning, but they're still doing a pretty good job, taking care of some pianos out there. And, if you haven't, my opinion is, if you have an ETD, there's a chance that you can do a pretty good enough job to get yourself out there and get going and tell people, hey, I'm a piano tuner. But what I would say is, at that point, you should also be pursuing your ear skills. So I don't know, that's the side of it where I might have a little bit of resistance, because I don't want to shame people for going out and tuning.
I don't want to shame people, but I want to face reality. And he went on to say, and I have said dozens of times, in my opinion and in his opinion, and I know in a lot of my other mentors' opinions, tuning using your ears to tune a piano is like the portal to a higher level of focus and attention. That if you really enter the world of sound when you tune, then it's the greatest ear training, and it allows you to focus and thus hear better without the clatter of your self-critical dialogue overwhelming your experience of just being with that sound. So
I love and to follow up with what I was saying before, and I love the side of that's an invitation, join me in this world of auditory focus that's so magical that you might be missing out on here if you're just watching a machine. And then on top of that,
100%.
The sort of level of the level of intensity that you can get from that, sort of like selling it a little bit and making it appealing and enjoyable. Oh, and the other point I want to say is saying you can do that, right? That's what you do a lot of times, David, I think, is encourage people, because I think I can say, come join me in this world of auditory focus and really get into how the sounds go. And it's really easy for somebody to say, yeah, that sounds exquisite, but I can't, right? I tried it, my ears don't work right or whatever. I think a lot of what you say, David, is ignore that voice in your head that says your ears aren't good enough, and just step in the door and put some time and energy in, and it's more accessible than you think.
Exactly. And simpler than you think. That's another kind of Jeremiad I'm on, in one sense. I think the way people are taught how to tune is too cerebral. And this is my personal feeling, and that learning how to tune by just setting some simple, limited, clean protocols, and then just saying, listen, make it sound good. And using simple protocols and really using your ears rather than calculating stuff in your mind when you're tuning, rather than thinking, oh my God, I have to be a mathematician to tune a piano. You don't. You just have to focus your brilliant, awesome, multi-$100 trillion ears on the task at hand. It's focus, man. That's what it's about. Entering the world of sound. And that's a beautiful gift. I've said for 30 odd years, I'm blown out that people pay me to go basically enter the world of sound and meditate for an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes or whatever it is. It's amazing. So that's how I feel. And I'm starting to use a machine for the top 10 notes of the piano because I need to, because I'm 72 years old. And I'm so grateful.
And that chime sound in the background of David's audio, we'll pretend that is the bell for the hour. We're about to wrap up.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting session, actually. I'm surprised how much time we spent on this. We talked about a bunch of different topics that we could cover, and some very interesting perspectives and insights from folks. And excited to share this further with others. I'm just behind the scenes, so you guys know, we had put out a few podcast episodes from the radio hour sessions so that people could listen to it as a podcast. Don't have them up yet, but got back into working behind the scenes here to get some of those up and running so that people can listen to these sessions on their player of choice. And I think a session like this will be good for the folks, that are dealing with anything in the particular moment that they're kind of a little wary about getting into, just to give them a little bit of a boost, especially the tuning and the ear tuning work. So,
yeah.
That's great.
If you're a reader, I'm gonna shill for my sister. My little sister is a best-selling business author, and her latest book is, I think, one of her best, and it's called Be Bad First. And she really goes in, Alan, she really goes into the roots of the fear of failure, the roots of the fear of, being an idiot. And it's fascinating and it's good. Thank you.
I'll put a link in the chat to that, and I have listened to the audiobook, so that's fun, right? We're all auditory, and I think she reads it herself.
She does.
So that's always a bonus when the author reads the book herself.
Voice. That's right.
Yeah, very, very good.
So to my lovely community here, so grateful to have you. So grateful that you find enough interest in what we generate to tune in every week, and we get new people every week, and it's just a constantly evolving thing, and I'm just really grateful. I'm just really grateful for it.
Me too. All right, folks. Well, we'll wrap it up for today, and we'll catch you next week. Have a great week. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. Remember that you can catch us live online every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's right. Go to pianotechradio.com to register so you can interact live and ask questions of our guests.
See you next week.